For 50 years, Charles Schulz never missed a single day of drawing Peanuts. But in December 1999, he put down his pen and made a decision that shocked the world, and ensured that after he was gone, no one would ever be allowed to draw Snoopy again. Think about the gravity of that moment. In an industry where corporate greed routinely strips creators of their intellectual property to keep a cash cow alive forever, Charles Schulz stood alone. He chose to end the most popular comic strip in human history rather than let a stranger touch his characters. This wasn't just a career decision. It was a desperate, final stand to protect the artistic soul of a masterpiece. To understand why he did it, we have to look behind the curtain of the billion-dollar Peanuts empire, at the immense personal sacrifices and the tragic price Schulz paid to keep his promise to the world. To fully comprehend the weight of this decision, we must step back to the autumn of 1950. When a quiet, self-doubting young artist named Charles Schulz first pitched his comic strip to United Feature Syndicate, the world of cartooning was dominated by grand adventures, detective thrillers, and loud, slapstick humor. Schulz brought something completely different to the table: childhood anxiety, unrequited love, and the quiet, heavy sadness of everyday life. At first, the syndicate didn't even want the name he had chosen, which was Lil Folks. Instead, they forced him to call it Peanuts, a name Schulz hated because he felt it lacked any sense of dignity. Yet, despite the rocky start, the strip exploded in popularity. It grew from running in just 7 newspapers to over 2,600 publications worldwide, reaching an estimated 355 million readers. As the decades rolled on, the commercial demand for Charlie Brown and Snoopy skyrocketed. Peanuts became a global licensing juggernaut, generating a staggering $1 billion in annual revenue. In the corporate entertainment industry, the standard operating procedure for a brand of this size is simple: hire an army of assistants, ghostwriters, and commercial artists to scale the production. But Charles Schulz utterly refused. He stood firm against the corporate tide, insisting on writing, drawing, inking, and lettering every single strip himself. But this absolute devotion to his craft hides a bizarre, shocking paradox. If Charles Schulz was so fiercely protective of his characters that he refused to let anyone else ink a single blade of grass on Charlie Brown's lawn, why on earth did he allow Snoopy to appear on plastic lunchboxes, insurance commercials, and giant MetLife blimps? How could a man who guarded the artistic soul of his strip with his life simultaneously lease its body to the highest corporate bidders? The answer to this contradiction isn't greed. It is actually a brilliant, high-stakes defense mechanism that Schulz engineered to protect his creations from the syndicate, a strategy that eventually led to a heartbreaking phone call and a contract clause that changed the comic industry forever. To understand how this strategy worked, we have to look at the daily reality of Schulz's life and the intense labor he poured into the strip. For nearly 50 years, Schulz operated as a solitary, one-man production line. While other famous cartoonists built entire studios filled with assistants who handled the backgrounds, the coloring, and the final ink work, Schulz worked completely alone in his California studio. He believed that the very essence of a cartoon strip lies in the highly personal touch of the artist's hand. There are 3 powerful examples that demonstrate just how far he was willing to go to maintain this absolute control. First, look at how he handled physical adversity. Later in his life, Schulz developed a severe hand tremor that made drawing incredibly difficult. An assistant could have easily taken over the physical drawing, while Schulz simply provided the ideas. Instead, Schulz adjusted his grip on the pen, squeezing it tighter, and using the natural, shaky vibrations of his hand to define the art style. The slightly wavy, fragile lines of the 90s weren't a stylistic choice. They were the literal, physical battle of a man refusing to let go of his creation. Second, think about the writing itself. Peanuts was unique because it didn't just offer easy punchlines. It explored deep psychological themes like clinical depression, existential dread, and chronic loneliness. Schulz knew that these feelings were deeply tied to his own childhood wounds and adult struggles. He realized that a hired writer would inevitably sanitize these complex emotions, turning Charlie Brown into a generic caricature. Third, consider the lettering. To Schulz, handwriting was an essential form of art. He meticulously hand-lettered every single word in every single speech bubble, ensuring that the visual rhythm of the dialogue perfectly matched his artistic intent. This complete, uncompromising devotion to sole authorship meant that every single panel of the nearly 18,000 strips he produced was a direct, unfiltered connection between his mind and the reader. This brings us back to the paradox of licensing. Why did he allow the massive merchandising if he was so obsessed with artistic purity? The truth is, Schulz used licensing as a shield. By generating hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandising revenue, he became far too wealthy and powerful for the syndicate to control. This financial independence gave him unprecedented leverage. In 1990, Schulz utilized this leverage to negotiate an extraordinary contract with United Feature Syndicate. His 5 children had actually approached him with a profound observation. They couldn't bear the thought of another cartoonist trying to pretend to be their father after he was gone. Schulz agreed. He fought for and secured a clause stating that when he retired or passed away, the comic strip would end immediately. The syndicate could rerun old strips, but no new Peanuts comics would ever be created. This was a revolutionary victory for creator rights. If you look at other legendary comic strips, the corporate syndicates almost always own the characters. When the original creators retired or died, the syndicate simply hired cheap, anonymous artists to keep drawing the strip, resulting in zombie-like continuations that slowly drained the work of its original magic and soul. Schulz's contract ensured that his characters would never suffer this slow, commercialized death. They would remain pure, forever frozen in the specific, genius universe he had crafted for them. But this beautiful arrangement was put to the ultimate test in November 1999, when Schulz was diagnosed with advanced, stage 4 colon cancer. The medical prognosis was grim, and the aggressive treatments quickly began to ravage his body. He suffered a stroke that severely impacted his vision and made it almost impossible to coordinate his thoughts and put words onto the page. He realized he had run out of time. In mid-December, Schulz made the heartbreaking decision to officially announce his retirement. Because of the technical nature of newspaper syndication, strips are always produced several weeks in advance to allow for printing and distribution. This meant there was a built-in lag time. Schulz's final daily strip was scheduled to print on January 3, 2000, while his grand, final Sunday strip was slated for February 13th. When it came to designing this final Sunday strip, Schulz rejected the idea of a flashy, dramatic ending. There would be no sudden victory for Charlie Brown, no long-awaited kicking of the football, and no grand romance with the little red-haired girl. To give Charlie Brown a happy ending would be a betrayal of the strip's core philosophy. The beauty of Peanuts was that Charlie Brown's struggles were universal. He was the eternal underdog who kept trying despite constant failure. Instead, Schulz chose to draw a quiet, highly personal farewell letter to his readers, accompanied by a drawing of Snoopy sitting at his typewriter on top of his doghouse, reflecting on 50 years of a beautiful life. To understand just how rare and sacred Schulz's approach was, you only have to look at the landscape of modern entertainment. Consider properties like Garfield, where the original creator Jim Davis eventually stepped back from the daily drawing and writing to oversee a massive corporate production studio. While Garfield continues to generate billions, many critics and fans argue that the strip lost its sharp, quirky edge decades ago, transforming into a repetitive, commercialized product. Look at Disney, where characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck have been drawn by hundreds of different artists over the generations, shifting in tone and personality depending on the corporate dictates of the era. Even iconic animation franchises like The Simpsons continue to run long after the original creative spark has cooled, kept alive by writing rooms that cycle through hundreds of different creators. Only a tiny handful of artists, like Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes and Gary Larson of The Far Side, chose to walk away entirely at the height of their popularity, preferring to let their work remain pristine. But unlike Watterson and Larson, who retired and quietly vanished into private life, Schulz's final exit was marked by an unbelievable, almost supernatural twist of fate. On the night of February 12, 2000, the eve of the publication of his final Sunday strip, Charles Schulz passed away quietly in his sleep. He died just hours before his farewell letter was delivered to the doorsteps of millions of readers around the world. It was as if his very life force was bound to the ink of his characters, holding on just long enough to ensure his final message was delivered before he took his final breath. By refusing to let anyone else draw Snoopy, Schulz preserved the magic of Peanuts forever. His characters will never grow old, they will never be ruined by a corporate committee, and they will never lose their soul. If you want to understand how another legendary creator fought an even bloodier, multi-million-dollar battle to protect his ultimate masterpiece from being ruined by greedy corporate executives, you need to hear the shocking story of how the creator of Calvin and Hobbes vanished from the face of the earth.